Lena Harper sat at a table set for 5 in the most aggressively cheerful new restaurant in Austin. The Grove was a cavern of warm woods, reclaimed brick, and the specific high-pitched clatter of people spending money they were proud to have. The air smelled of seared scallops and smoke-infused bourbon. Every table was full. A vibrant tableau of laughter and celebratory toasts echoed off the polished concrete floors. The noise, the sheer density of other people's joy, pressed in on Lena, making the silence at her own table feel vast and hollow. Her table was large, round, and perfectly centered in the dining room, secured by a reservation made 6 weeks ago. It was dominated by 4 empty chairs, 2 to her left, 2 to her right, and a small exquisite dessert sitting precisely in the middle. It was a lavender honey panna cotta, or perhaps a deconstructed cheesecake. She hadn't really paid attention when the server placed it down 20 minutes ago with a sympathetic tilt of the head. A single unlit candle stood starkly in its center. Lena was 34 today. Her phone, a sleek black rectangle on the dark walnut table, vibrated. It was the 11th time in 40 minutes. She didn't need to look at the screen. She knew the call display protocol. The first 3 calls were always Karen Whitaker, HOA president of Evergreen Meadows. The next 3, the vice president. The following 4, rapid fire, were Brad, the board's golden boy treasurer who always needed just one more favor. The 11th, the one that had just ceased, was Karen again, the anchor leg of the guilt relay. None of them had been answered. None had left a message. The phone screen went dark. In its black reflection, Lena saw her own face, pale under the strategic track lighting. Her eyes looked tired, but her suit was immaculate. A sharp midnight blue blazer, silk shell, the armor of a founder. The 4 empty chairs seemed to suck the oxygen out of the air around them. They weren't just empty. They were accusations. They were the physical representation of 15 years of identical evenings, of neighborhood potlucks where her chair stayed folded in the corner, of block party stages where the only applause came from strangers who didn't know the HOA had waived her invitation again. But this birthday was supposed to be different. This one mattered. Earlier today, at 4:52 p.m., the wire transfer had cleared. $1.4 million. The angel round for Haven Glow Organics, her clean home wellness company, was officially closed. The company she had built from nothing, funded for 3 years by refinancing her little Evergreen Meadows townhouse twice, surviving every absurd fine the board had slapped on her for unapproved lavender planters and lawn height deviation by 0.3 inches. She had done it. She had won. She had called them the moment the DocuSign was complete, buzzing with relief so profound it felt like vertigo. "It's done," she'd said, the words catching in her throat. "The round is closed. We're funded." "That's wonderful, dear," Karen's voice had replied, distant, preoccupied. "Listen, Brad's having trouble with the community golf cart fleet, and the board needs a hand with the annual gala budget. Can we celebrate tonight? 7:30 at the Grove. Just like you wanted." Now it was 8:15 p.m. The panna cotta was beginning to sweat. "Ma'am," a young waiter, barely 20, hovered at her elbow. He looked agonizingly sincere. "It's just the kitchen is getting ready for the late service push," he stammered, gesturing awkwardly to the dessert. "Would you like me to light that for cheer?" Lena looked at the unlit wick, then at the boy's earnest, uncomfortable face. She produced the smile she reserved for difficult investors and condescending suppliers. It was a precise, bright, mechanical thing that did not reach her eyes. She felt the skin around her mouth pull taut, a sensation like fine glass cracking. "No, thank you. I'm sure they're just running late." The lie tasted like ash. The waiter nodded, defeated, and retreated. Lena turned her gaze back to the empty chairs. The noise of the restaurant surged. a peal of laughter from the bar, the sharp clack of billiard balls from the lounge area. She felt a sudden intense wave of claustrophobia. Not from the crowd, but from the emptiness. "Excuse me," a voice said, smooth and low. "I apologize for interrupting, but I'm waiting on a table by the window, and my associate is apparently admiring the traffic on I-35. Would you mind terribly if I sat here just until your other guests arrive?" She looked up. The man was in his early 40s, with a face that looked lived in a good way. He wore a simple tweed jacket over a dark shirt, and his eyes were observant, kind, and held no trace of pity. He wasn't hitting on her. He was simply looking for a place to land. Lena found herself gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Be my guest. I seem to have a surplus." He slid into the seat, placing a small leather-bound notebook on the table. "Graham Ellery," he said, offering a hand. His grip was firm, dry. "Lena Harper." "A pleasure, Lena Harper. Are you celebrating?" he asked, nodding toward the tragic dessert. "I was supposed to be." The admission slipped out, sharper than she intended. Graham didn't flinch. He just looked at the 4 empty chairs, then back at her. He didn't offer a platitude. He didn't say, "I'm sure they'll be here soon." He just waited. The silence stretched, but it was a different kind. It wasn't the screaming silence of the empty chairs. It was the patient silence of an audience. "They aren't coming," Lena said. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. She hadn't said it aloud until now. It was a truth she had swallowed every year. But tonight, the night of her greatest professional triumph, it was indigestible. Graham nodded slowly, accepting the statement as fact, not as tragedy. He changed the subject seamlessly. "You have the look of someone who just accomplished something significant. The blazer is too sharp for a casual dinner, and you're sitting too straight. You won something today." Lena was momentarily stunned by the accuracy. The broken glass smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine surprise. "How did you?" "It's my job," he said simply. "What was it?" She hesitated. Why was she talking to this stranger? But the alternative was staring at the unlit candle, waiting for the 12th vibration. "I closed my angel round," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the words felt heavy. $1.4 million for my company." His eyebrows lifted. "That's not a small thing." "What's the company?" Lena felt a familiar spark ignite. She pulled her phone toward her, waking the screen. She bypassed the 11 missed calls and tapped the browser. She turned the phone around. "Haven Glow Organics. We're a clean certified sustainable home wellness brand. We focus on bioavailability and ethical sourcing." The grove's warm golden light reflected off the screen, catching the hero image of her flagship product, the Solstice Calm Diffuser, glowing in its elegant minimalist glass bottle. It looked like trapped sunlight. Graham leaned in, scrolling through the site. He read the About page. He looked at the ingredient sourcing map. He was not skimming. He was reading. "Lena Harper," he read aloud softly. He looked back up at her and his smile was genuine. "You built this from scratch against the supply chain crisis in this market. That is a monumental achievement. Congratulations. Truly." The words landed in the center of her chest with a physical weight. Congratulations. Truly. It was the validation from a stranger, a professional courtesy. And yet it was everything she had been waiting to hear from the empty chairs. It was the recognition of the work, not the cursory acknowledgement of an event. It was the apology she would never receive from the HOA board delivered by proxy. She felt a dangerous prickling behind her eyes. "Thank you," she managed. Graham seemed to understand. He looked back at the unlit candle. "The victory is real, Lena, even if the audience is late." "They're not late," she said. And the finality was cold, hard, and liberating. They're absent. Lena looked at the candle, at the tiny, perfect, untouched dessert. She thought of the 1.4 million, of the mortgage payments, of the 1,095 days of brutal, relentless focus. She had been waiting for permission to celebrate, waiting for the people who never showed up to finally grant her validation. She wished with a sudden violent clarity that she could stop waiting for an endorsement that would never come. She signaled the waiter. "Just the check, please." "But the cake, ma'am." "Your birthday." Lena slid her credit card out of her wallet. "I've had enough," she said. The smile this time was different. It wasn't broken. It was forged. She paid the bill. Graham stood as she did. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Lena. I hope you find a way to celebrate." "I just did," she said. She walked out of the restaurant, leaving the 4 empty chairs, the sympathetic staff, and the unlit candle behind. The warm, noisy air of the Grove gave way to the cool, quiet Austin night. She didn't look back. The deep velvet black of the 9 p.m. street dissolved into the harsh gray-blue light of the 5 a.m. Austin dawn. Lena Harper was not in her bed. She was standing on the Congress Avenue Bridge, dressed in running gear, watching the first hints of sunrise fracture the dark sky over Lady Bird Lake. The air was cold, sharp, and clean. She had not slept. She had gone home, showered, and put her victory in its proper place. Not in the hands of the HOA board, but on her balance sheet. She looked down at the dark, moving water. She thought of the phone call that would come later today. The eventual wounded we tried to call. You didn't answer. The inevitable pivot to a request, Brad's golf cart fleet. A new banner for the annual gala. She took a deep breath. The cold air burned her lungs. The determination that had built her company now shifted, recalibrating to a new target. The sun crested the horizon, flooding the city with a sudden, unforgiving light. If only HOA dues had a clear credit limit, Lena whispered to the new day. At least then you'd know exactly when you were overdrawn. 3 years. It's astonishing what you can build in 3 years when you stop waiting for an audience. That night at the Grove, my 34th birthday, the night I closed my 1.4 million angel round, I didn't go home and cry. I went home, showered, and at 5 a.m., I stood on the Congress Avenue Bridge and recalibrated. I treated Haven Glow Organics not as a passion, but as a fortress. The last 1,095 days had been a brutal, glorious siege. We survived the supply chain crisis by pivoting to domestic suppliers. We perfected a biofermentation process for our Solstice Calm diffuser that was 20% more stable than the market leader. We scaled. We hired. We bled. We grew. Haven Glow Organics went from a 1.4 million concept to a 35 million valuation. The valuation news wasn't quiet. It broke on Forbes. The headline was cinematic. From unlit candles to a 35 million empire, how Lena Harper built Haven Glow on her own terms. I hadn't spoken to the journalist about my birthday, but she'd clearly done her research, finding the Old Grove reservation manifest or talking to ex-staff. The narrative was set. The founder who was literally left alone at her own celebration. The article went viral at 9 a.m. At 9:17 a.m., my phone, which had been blissfully silent for months, lit up. Karen. I stared at the screen. I was in my office, a clean glass-walled space overlooking the Texas Hill Country. I let it ring twice, a small test of my own resolve before picking up. Hi, Karen. Lena. Darling. The voice that hit my ear was a shock. It was warm, effervescent, and thick with a pride so manufactured it felt sticky. It was the voice she used on bank managers and the chair of the country club committee. It was a voice I hadn't heard directed at me since my first big product launch, right before she and the board left early to get Brad to a regional HOA charity golf qualifier. We just saw the article. Honey. We are just bursting with pride. The board, well, they're practically speechless. A 35 million company. We always knew you had it in you. You always knew. The lie was so reflexive, so automatic. I almost felt a numb admiration for it. I said nothing. Silence, I've learned, is a vacuum, and people like Karen are compelled to fill it. It's perfect timing. Honey. Feels like a sign, a real neighborhood blessing. There it was. The pivot. Not a question about the work. Not an, I'm sorry we missed that birthday. Just the bridge to the transaction. A blessing. How so? I kept my voice flat, devoid of invitation. Well, you'll never guess, Brad is engaged. To a lovely girl, Tiffany. And we were all just sitting here talking. And with your wonderful news, it just makes sense. This is the moment for us all to finally come together as a community. We had the most brilliant idea, Evergreen Glow, a subsidiary, maybe a neighborhood venture. Evergreen Glow. The sheer glittering audacity of it took my breath away. They wanted to graft the HOA name onto the thing I had built in their absence. Karen, I said, cutting through the static. I'm walking into a board meeting. I have to call you back. I disconnected before the sugary warmth could morph into wounded obligation. I hadn't even set the phone down before it buzzed with a text. This time it was Brad. His approach was, as always, less subtle. Hey sis, neighbor, Mom told you the great news. Tiff and I are tying the knot. Also, huge opportunity for HG. My charity golf team needs a new primary sponsor for the national circuit. It's $280K for the season. Think of the exposure, HG logo right on the cart. Amazing press. Let's talk. I read the message twice. No congratulations. No wow. Lena. Just a wedding announcement used as an icebreaker for a $280,000 invoice. The casual assumption that my $35 million valuation was a communal checking account made my stomach tighten. It was the same assumption that led them to believe I could just move my 34th birthday dinner or that I wouldn't mind sitting alone. My success wasn't my own. It was the HOA's new asset. I swiveled in my chair away from the skyline and toward my monitor. I minimized Brad's text. I opened a locked folder on my drive. It was simply labeled Archive. My archives weren't just memories. They were data. I opened the violation subfolder. There I was, year after year. Screenshots of every absurd fine. April 2017. $450 for lavender planter height violation. June 2018. $220 for mailbox flag decal not pre-approved. August 2018. $780 for lawn measurement discrepancy. The list went on. Methodical and cold. It spanned the 6 years since my first significant paycheck. Every transfer was a moment I had chosen to buy peace instead of demanding respect. Every dollar was a silent thank you for nothing. I highlighted the column and clicked the sum button. Total, $49,300 in one-way community contributions. And now, having seen the 35 million headline, they had inflated their ask. The price of their support had just gone from $2,000 increments to $280,000. My intercom buzzed. It was Naomi, my CFO, ex-Deloitte and sharp enough to cut glass. Your 930 is here. Naomi, quick question, I said, leaning toward the receiver. Hypothetical. If a homeowner's HOA board members who have zero equity and no formal role start suggesting neighborhood ventures after valuation, what's the legal exposure? There was a dry pause. Are they implying they have a claim? They're implying they're entitled to the upside. Lena, Naomi said, her voice dropping into that familiar, sterile legal tone. Your operating agreement is an ironclad document. You are the founder and majority shareholder. Your company has zero legal, fiduciary, or corporate obligation to anyone named on the Evergreen Meadows board unless you create one, which, She added, I would advise against with extreme prejudice. Community dues are not recognized by the IRS or the state of Texas. Thank you, Naomi. The legal validation was the armor, but I needed the spine. My phone buzzed again. A personal text from my best friend, Ray. Ray had been the one who brought me pizza at 3 a.m. while I coded the first Haven Glow website. She had held the ladder when I painted my first shipping office. Ray saw the Forbes piece. You are a goddess. Also, just got the weirdest text from Karen about Evergreen Glow and Brad's wedding. Please tell me you're laughing. I typed back, he wants $280K for his golf carts. Her reply was instantaneous. They didn't lift a single goddamn lawnmower when you were fined into oblivion. Lena, you don't owe them a single crumb now that you're full. She was right. But no was a wall. A wall could be torn down or gone around or worn down. A new email popped into my inbox from Graham Ellery. The name still gave me a strange jolt. We'd kept in sporadic touch since that night at the Grove. He was a good mentor, a man who understood endurance. Subject, build. The email was short. Lena, I saw the news. The victory is real. The validation is yours, not theirs. Remember, a boundary isn't a wall to keep people out. It's a foundation you build your life on. Gee, a foundation, not a wall. He was right. A wall is defense. A foundation is a statement of fact. I stared at the $49,300 on my Excel sheet. I looked at Brad's $280,000 text. I took a deep breath. I was done buying peace. I opened a new email to Karen. The board, Brad. Subject, re-congratulations. Wedding news. Dear board, thank you for the well wishes on the Forbes article. It's been an intense 3 years. I am also very happy to hear about Brad's engagement to Tiffany. Regarding the suggestions for an Evergreen Glow partnership and the golf sponsorship, I am always open to exploring legitimate business opportunities, but only when they are built on a foundation of complete professional transparency. My success with Haven Glow was not an accident. It was the result of specific documented work and significant personal financial investment. Our neighborhood also has a specific documented financial history. Before any discussion of a new business relationship can begin, I believe we need to clear the slate and bring our past dealings to zero. Attached, you will find an itemized ledger. It details the $49,300 in personal fines and expenses I have covered for the board over the past 6 years. This is not a bill. This is simply the data. This is the starting point for any good faith professional negotiation. Once this ledger is acknowledged and balanced, I would be happy to evaluate a formal proposal. Best, Lena. My finger hovered over the attachment icon. I dragged the HOA Ledger V1 file into the draft. I stared at the file name. My hand was perfectly steady. I hit send. The digital file, HOA Ledger V1, vanished into the void. I felt a strange hollow calm. It was the same feeling I'd had right after I signed the refinance papers on my townhouse. Risking everything for the angel round. It was the point of no return. The reply came in 53 seconds. It wasn't an email. Emails are for business, for record keeping. It was a text message sent straight to my personal phone. Texts are for emotion, for a rapid, visceral strike. It was from Karen. Lena, I cannot believe you would send something so cold and calculating to your own neighborhood. After everything the board has done for you, we were always your support. You are an ungrateful resident. Ungrateful? The word landed like a physical blow. A well-worn cudgel. It was the word they used when I didn't attend the annual gala because I was pitching for my first seed funding. It was the word they used when I refused to co-sign the loan for Brad's new golf cart fleet. It was their panic button, the one they pressed when they feared their control was slipping. We were always your support. The lie was so bald, so reflexive, it almost bypassed anger and went straight to absurdity. They weren't my support. They were my audience. And they were an audience that only showed up when they expected to be paid. My fingers moved over the screen. I was done absorbing the blows. I have been grateful for 15 years. Karen, I was grateful with my silence when you missed every complaint about the ridiculous fines. I was grateful with my money when I paid Brad's golf cart repairs for a year. I was grateful by accepting the lost opportunity to have the board at my 34th birthday, the night I closed my first round. My gratitude has been paid in full. The ledger is just the receipt. I hit send. Then, for the first time in my life, I went into my contacts. I found the group I'd created years ago, Evergreen Board, and I tapped hide alerts. The foundation was set. Now I just had to wait and see if it would hold. The digital silence that followed was heavier and more pressurized than the 11 missed calls at the Grove. It was the vacuum that precedes a storm front. The company didn't care about my neighborhood drama. Haven Glow demanded my full attention. We were scaling up production, negotiating new leases, and trying to poach a brilliant chemist from Bath and Body Works for 3 days. I buried myself in the clean, solvable problems of logistics and R&D. On the fourth night, my personal phone lit up. It was Graham Ellery. G in town for a story. Balcony 8 p.m. I hadn't moved from the townhouse I'd refinanced. I paid it off, but I stayed. It was a reminder. When he arrived, I handed him a mug of black tea, and we stood on the narrow balcony. It didn't overlook the serene hills. It overlooked the concrete reality of Austin. The endless streaming river of red and white taillights on I-35 hissed below us. A noisy, gleaming artery that never slept. Graham didn't ask what happened with the email. He just knew. He was an endurance writer. He understood the moment after the summit when the exhaustion hits. How does it feel? He asked, sipping his tea. Quiet, I admitted, watching a semi-truck navigate the interchange. I thought it would feel like a victory. It just feels like accounting. That's what integrity is most of the time, he said, his voice a low rumble beneath the traffic noise. It's not the dramatic explosion. It's the quiet click of the lock. It's just balancing the books. He leaned on the railing, looking down at the lights. They'll push. You know, people who are used to walking through walls don't react well when they suddenly find a foundation. They'll accuse you of building a fortress. It's not a fortress, I said, repeating his own words from 3 years ago. It's a foundation. They won't see the difference. The email was a declaration. The follow-through, that's the battle. He was right. The battle began exactly 1 week after I sent the ledger. I was in a logistics meeting with Naomi. We were deep in a spreadsheet dissecting inbound freight costs. My assistant, Maya, buzzed the intercom. Her voice was tight with professional panic. Lena, I'm not sure how to handle this. Karen and Brad are in the lobby. They said it's a surprise. They brought cake. Cake. The prop. The weaponization of pastry. The precise symbol of every celebration they had ever missed. Now wielded as a Trojan horse. My office was a converted warehouse designed for transparency. My personal office was glass-walled. The lobby was visible through a half-wall of glass brick. I could see them. Karen, dressed in her country club best, holding a pink bakery box as if it were a diplomatic offering. Brad, shifting awkwardly beside her, looking too large and out of place in a bright green polo shirt bearing the logo of his charity golf team. My entire team could see them, the marketing department, the ops managers. They were all frozen, furiously pretending to type. They had all read the Forbes article. They knew who this board was. This was the board that didn't show up. Naomi, stay here. I'll handle this, I said quietly. I stood up, smoothed the front of my dress, and walked out of my office. The click of my heels on the polished concrete floor was the only sound. The energetic chatter of the office had died. I stopped 5 feet from them. Karen. Brad. What are you doing here? Lena. Honey. Karen surged forward, arms open for a hug. I didn't step back. I didn't flinch. I just stood still. It was like hugging a marble pillar. Her arms landed, faltered, and then dropped, her bright smile flickering with the failed contact. Well, we were just in the area, she chirped, recovering instantly, holding the cake box up. We wanted to finally celebrate that wonderful article. We brought your favorite strawberry shortcake from that little bakery you used to love. The bakery that had closed 8 years ago. The performance was flawless. The research was shoddy. This is not a good time, I said. Oh, nonsense. Will only be a minute. Your office is just beautiful. Where's the break room? We can share it with your lovely staff. She was already pivoting, looking for an audience, ready to play the role of the proud neighborhood matriarch. I looked at the curious faces of my employees. I would not give them this show. I would not let her poison my workplace with her theater. In here, I said. I gestured to the smallest meeting room, a 4-person huddle room right off the lobby. We called it the Nook. It was floor-to-ceiling glass, a fishbowl. I wanted that. I wanted the visibility. It would force civility. I led them in. Brad had to duck slightly. I slid the heavy glass door shut. The sound of the office was instantly muffled, reduced to a distant hum. I did not sit. I stood by the door, my arms crossed. Karen placed the cake box on the white laminate table. It looked absurd next to the sleek Polycom speakerphone. Lena. Honestly, she started. The moment the door clicked, the sugary warmth evaporated. Her voice was sharp. That email, it was a vicious, cruel thing to. This is my workplace. Karen. I cut her off. My voice was quiet, but it cut through hers. I know that, she snapped. We just wanted to congratulate you, to see what you've built. It's incredible. All this for you. Her gesture was vague, dismissive. Brad, meanwhile, had been silently casing the room. He ran a hand over the fabric of an Eames chair, as if calculating its cost. He wandered over to the wall unit where we displayed the full Haven Glow product line. The diffusers, the candles, the cleansers, all glowing like jewels under dedicated LED lights. He picked up a 1-ounce bottle of the Solstice Calm diffuser, our hero product, the one that funded everything. Wow, he said, whistling low. He weighed it in his hand. These little bottles must be crazy expensive. What, like 80, 90 bucks for this? 115, I said. It's our flagship. It funds our R&D, our ethical sourcing, and our payroll. Right? He set it down, unimpressed by the sourcing, only by the number. So that $280K I mentioned, that's like what? 2 pallets of this stuff. Easy. Think of the exposure I could get you. There it was. The calculation, the immediate transactional pivot from congratulations to what I am owed. He saw my $35 million valuation not as a victory, but as an inventory he could access. The $280,000, I said, my voice dropping, and the suggestion of evergreen glow and the money for the wedding that Karen mentioned on the phone. The money you, Brad, texted me about this morning to cover the deposit on the new reception hall. I looked from him to Karen. They both looked startled, like animals caught in headlights. It's a pattern, I said, keeping my voice level. Surgical. It's a common denominator. You don't call to connect. You call to request. You don't show up to celebrate. You show up to collect. Karen's face hardened. The mask of the proud neighborhood mother fell away, revealing the bitter, offended woman beneath. This was the real person, the one who had let me sit alone at the Grove. My goodness, she whispered, her voice thick with venom. Success has made you cold. Lena, there it was, the final accusation. The one I had been trained my whole life to fear. Being called cold, unloving, ungrateful. I looked her dead in the eye. The glass walls of the meeting room seemed to press in, magnifying the moment. "No," I said. "I'm not cold." I took a breath. I just stopped pretending. The silence in the fishbowl was absolute. I stopped pretending that your presence was a given. I stopped pretending that my achievements were communal property. I stopped pretending that your support didn't always come with an invoice attached. One I was always expected to pay. I reached past her and put my hand on the handle of the sliding glass door. The ledger was data. "This is the conclusion. This company," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the small space. "Haven Glow Organics is not the neighborhood ATM. It is not your retirement plan, and it is not Brad's sponsor." I slid the door open. The sounds of the office rushed back in, keyboards typing, the phone ringing. Brad looked at the floor. His face flushed a deep, angry red. He wasn't used to this. Karen's lips were a thin white line. She had no script for this. Her emotional leverage was gone. The $49,300 ledger had neutralized it. Without a word, she grabbed the pink bakery box from the table. She didn't look at me. She looked at the exit. "I see," she said. Her voice was brittle, like ice shattering. I stepped out of the doorway and held it open. They walked out. Their backs were perfectly, painfully straight. It was the rigid posture of profound offended pride. They marched past my team, past Maya's desk, past the curious faces of my employees who were all furiously pretending to work. I watched them through the glass as they waited for the elevator. The doors chimed, opened, they stepped in, they vanished. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still on the door. Then I slid the glass door shut again, enclosing myself in the silence of the nook. I leaned my forehead against the cool solid glass. Looking out at the company I had built, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for an hour, or perhaps for my entire life. The silence in the office after they left was absolute. My team, my brilliant, dedicated team, was furiously, painfully focused on their screens. No one looked at me. No one looked at the empty lobby. The only sound was the clicking of keyboards twice as fast as normal. I stood in the glass fishbowl of the nook for a moment longer. The abandoned pink cake box was still on the table. A pathetic sugary bomb that had failed to detonate. I walked out, picked up the box, and dropped it into the recycling bin. I did not say a word. I returned to my office, sat down, and pulled up the P&L projections for the next quarter. I was forcing my pulse to slow to match the steady, predictable rhythm of the numbers. The professional silence held for 7 hours. The personal one broke in 8. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a text. It was a notification. At 10:17 p.m., my phone buzzed on my nightstand. A high school acquaintance, someone I hadn't spoken to in a decade, had tagged me in a Facebook post. My fingers felt cold. I tapped the link. It was Brad's public page. He hadn't tagged me, but he didn't need to. His post was short, written with the wounded, self-aggrandizing flair of someone who has never been told no. It's sad when you see success change people. Some people just forget where they came from. They'd rather have money than a community. Just remember who was there for you before you were important. True loyalty is priceless. He had punctuated it with a community-first hashtag. It was a masterpiece of plausible deniability. Vague enough to be about anyone, but specific enough for everyone who knew us to understand. The comment section was already blooming with sympathetic poison. "So true, Brad. Keep your head up, man. Their loss." My phone buzzed again. A text message. This time from that same high school acquaintance. "Hey Lena, saw Brad's post. That's rough. Are you okay?" I looked at the message. "Are you okay?" It was the question of a spectator sniffing for drama. They wanted the other side of the story. They wanted a fight. They wanted me to descend to his level to trade accusations on a public forum. I turned the phone over, screen down on the nightstand. I would not engage. I would not participate in the circus. The community first golf team could have its drama. I had a company to run. My refusal to engage, however, was seen as a vacuum, and Brad, emboldened by the silence, decided to escalate. He didn't just want public sympathy. He wanted to inflict professional pain. He wanted to prove that he, the board's golden boy, had power. The next call came at 11 a.m. the following morning, not to my personal phone, but to my direct line at the office. Maya buzzed me. Her voice clipped. "Lena, it's Alistair Thorne from Keystone Capital." My blood went cold. Alistair Thorne was not just an investor. He was the investor. He led the 1.4 million angel. He was the gray-haired, immaculately dressed man who ran Keystone, the most respected VC firm in Austin. He was the kingmaker. I picked up the phone. "Alistair, good to hear from you." "Lena," his voice was like dry ice. "No pleasantries. I just received a rather colorful email from a young man named Brad Whitaker. He claims to be on the HOA board. He claims to be the head of the neighborhood's charity division. And that community turmoil regarding breached promises of funding is about to cause significant reputational and operational disruption for Haven Glow. He advised me to reconsider Keystone's position. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a Facebook post. This was sabotage. This was Brad trying to burn my fortress to the ground. He had contacted my investors. "Alistair," I said, my voice miraculously steady. I was grateful for the glass walls of my office. I could see my team working and it grounded me. "That email is a fabrication. There is no charity division of this company. There were no promises of funding. Brad is acting on a personal grievance after I declined to provide him with a $280,000 sponsorship from Haven Glow's operational budget. He calls it a grievance. You call it a declination. I call it a material risk," Thorne said, his voice flat. "I don't care about neighborhood drama. Lena, I care about my investment. This is a noise I don't appreciate. It implies instability in the founder. It implies your judgment is compromised by personal conflicts. My judgment is what gave you a 28% growth projection for this quarter." I countered, not missing a beat. There was a pause. Cold, calculating silence. "Be at the Grove in 1 hour," he said. "We're having lunch." The line clicked dead. The Grove. He had chosen the restaurant from the Forbes article. He had chosen the scene of my original humiliation. This was not a lunch. It was a test. I was there in 45 minutes. I was at a small table for 2, not the large, hopeful table for 5. When Thorne arrived, he didn't apologize for being curt. He sat, unfolded his napkin, and looked at me. "Your board," he said, "feels they are entitled to your success." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. "They do," I agreed. "They believe your company is their bank. They believe my capital is their capital." "He is mistaken," I said. The waiter arrived. Thorne ordered a steak tartare. I ordered nothing. I wasn't there to eat. "The optics are poor. Lena," he continued, steepling his fingers. "A public Facebook post. An email to investors. It's messy. It's amateur." "It is," I agreed. "But it is his mess, not mine." "Prove it." I looked at this man who held the financial fate of my company in his hands. He didn't care about my feelings. He didn't care about my missed birthdays. He cared about one thing. Was I a stable asset? Or was I a liability entangled in a messy, unpredictable neighborhood? The partnership he is referencing is a $280,000 sponsorship for his personal golf hobby. demanded the same day my valuation went public. I also received a request for a neighborhood venture called Evergreen Glow. I declined both. I sent them an itemized ledger of $49,300 in personal fines I have given the board over 6 years and stated that no professional relationship could exist when the personal one was so clearly transactional. Thorne's expression didn't change, but his focus intensified. And what is your position on any future neighborhood collaboration? This was the question. This was the test. He was asking if I would capitulate, if I would buy their silence to make the noise go away. There will be no partnership, I said. There will be no sponsorship. There will be no Evergreen Glow. The board has no equity, no role, and no claim, legal, moral, or otherwise, on Haven Glow. My company is not and will not be their ATM. The noise you're hearing is the sound of an entitlement being denied for the first time. Thorne stared at me. The restaurant buzzed around us. The same clatter of joy and commerce I'd heard 3 years ago. But I wasn't the woman with the unlit candle anymore. He finally nodded. 28% growth doesn't lie, he said, repeating my line. You're right. It's just noise. He picked up his fork. Smart, Harper. Very smart. Now, let's talk about your new distribution channel. The crisis was over. It had lasted exactly 7 minutes. I had been weighed, and I had not been found wanting. I walked out of the Grove an hour later. Not into the 5 a.m. dawn of desperation, but into the 1 p.m. sunlight of absolute clarity. I didn't go back to the office. I went to my townhouse. I sat at my desk. Brad wanted to be a public figure. He wanted to attach his name to mine. He wanted to use my company for exposure. Fine. I opened my laptop. I called my PR director. Sarah, I want to launch the fellowship program today. By 4 p.m. The press release was out. Haven Glow Organics announces the HG Fellows Fund, a $500,000 grant program for young female founders in Texas. My statement was clear. I built this company on a foundation of resilience and data. It is my honor to provide the capital and the support that so many founders, especially women, never receive from their established networks. My real neighborhood, my real investment. The post went live on all our corporate channels. It was instantly flooded with positive engagement. It was an act of creation, not reaction. But I had one more thing to do. I opened a private browser tab. I went to the donation page for the Texas Youth Golf Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to junior player education. Brad wanted $280,000 for his team. I typed in a different number, $20,000. I filled in the payment details. In the donor name box, I clicked the checkbox. Make this donation anonymous. I wasn't anti-golf. I wasn't anti-support. I was just done. I hit submit. It was a clean, quiet action. No PR. No recognition. Just an act. My phone buzzed. A text this time from the board vice president. Your mother, Karen, is humiliated. That stunt at your office was beneath you. You are demeaning yourself and this neighborhood by airing this laundry. He, of course, saw no irony in the fact that I hadn't aired anything. I read the text. Humiliated, demeaning yourself, neighborhood. The words were just words. They had lost their power. They were the fog. I deleted the message without replying. The next morning my inbox was flooded. Fast Company, Forbes, the Austin Business Journal. Subject, interview request, the HG Fellows Fund. Subject, following up on your Q3 growth ESG. Subject, HG's new sustainability initiative. Not a single email. Not one. Not about Brad. Not about a Facebook post. Not about neighborhood turmoil. The market didn't care about the smoke. Cared about the fire. And I was building an inferno. That evening, my apartment buzzer rang. It was Graham. He was holding a large paper bag. You can't build an empire on an empty stomach, he said, walking in. He unpacked containers of Thai food. He didn't ask about the drama. He didn't mention Karen or Brad or Keystone. He just pointed to his laptop bag. I saw the HG Fellows announcement. We sat on the balcony overlooking the same river of lights on I-35. "You're handling this well," he said quietly, picking at some noodles. "Most people, when they get attacked like that, they either fight back or they fold. They throw more smoke." I watched the traffic, the endless stream of people going somewhere. "You," he said, "you just built something. You're burning away the fog. There's a difference." I took a bite of food. It was the first thing I'd tasted all day. "It's just balancing the books, Graham. Like you said." He smiled. "It's a hell of an entry. Burning away the fog doesn't just reveal the path forward. It reveals with perfect cold clarity the landscape of what you left behind." Graham's visit had settled something in me. My actions, the Fellows Fund, the anonymous donation had been about building, but Brad's attack on Keystone Capital and the vice president's text about demeaning the neighborhood proved that their sense of entitlement was a weed. You don't just mow a weed. You have to pull it out by the root. My ledger had been the first tug. Now I needed to excavate the entire system. That weekend I went into my storage unit. I wasn't looking for memories. I was looking for evidence. In the back, under a stack of old product samples, was a large gray plastic tub. It was labeled simply Lena, HOA Years. I clicked open the latches. The air that escaped smelled like dry paper and old plastic. The first thing I found was a stack of violation notices bundled with a brittle rubber band. They were the birthday cards from the board, pristine, uncreased. Not a single one had been followed by actual help. Not a single complaint had been addressed. They were all neatly signed. "Regards, Karen and Board." I cross-referenced the dates. My first big product launch. My second funding round. My third milestone. These were the moments I spent fighting alone. I had always assumed they just forgot. The truth was colder. They hadn't forgotten. They had performed the gesture, written the fine, fulfilled the barest minimum of the obligation, and then failed to complete the 30-cent task of actually listening. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a profound categorical lack of follow-through. I put the stack aside. It was Exhibit A. Beneath the notices was a jumbled album of printed photos. I shook it and a loose photo fell out. It was the 9th anniversary of my move-in. I was at the head of a folding table set for 10 people. The chairs were empty. I was sitting alone in a party hat staring at a cake with all 9 candles melted down into pools of colored wax. My expression was one of patient numbness. On the back in Karen's cursive it said, "Lena's move-in 2015. But tucked in the same album, just 3 pages later, was another photo, clearly misfiled. It was Karen and Brad, standing next to a massive snow-covered golf cart. They were holding up a string of trophies. The print was date-stamped. It was the same week as my move-in anniversary. The back of that photo read, "Aspen HOA Retreat. Brad's first big win. 2015. They weren't at my table. They weren't even in the state. They were in Aspen celebrating Brad. I had sat at that table for 3 hours alone waiting for them. While the candles melted, I closed the album. This was no longer an investigation. It was an autopsy. When I got home, I began the digital phase. I didn't need dusty boxes anymore. I had the cloud. I unearthed my old complaint files from the HOA portal. My archived reports. The board kept meticulous records. I scrolled through the scanned PDF copies. My appeals were all there. 15 separate events over 4 years. 15 objective third-party verifications of the empty chairs. I was building a new spreadsheet. It wasn't the HOA ledger of money. This one was titled Timeline of Absence. Then I went into my iCloud backups. I had archives of voicemails I'd saved. Not for sentiment, but because they contained information. I searched for Karen. I found one. It was from my senior year of product launch prep, just before my final investor pitch. Lena, honey, I am so sorry. I know we said we'd be there for your big presentation, but Brad, well, he blew the engine on his golf cart, and the qualifying tournament is this weekend, and the board just has to get him to the course in Oklahoma. It's his future. Honey, you understand? You're so smart. You'll be fine. We'll celebrate next time. I hit pause. I downloaded the M4A file. I saved it. I went to the HOA Facebook page, which I hadn't looked at in years. I scrolled back to that same week in 2011. Karen's post at the Oklahoma course. So proud of Brad. This kid has real grit. Nothing more important than supporting your neighborhood leaders. There was a photo. Karen arm in arm with Brad beaming. I took a screenshot. I dragged the screenshot and the voicemail file into timeline of absence. Column A, investor pitch. Column B, voicemail canceled for Oklahoma. Column C, screenshot at Oklahoma. The work was methodical. Took all of Sunday. I cross-referenced every missed milestone, every skipped complaint, every visit with their own public social media. Every single absence from my life corresponded directly to a celebrated presence for Brad. The $49,300 I had sent them wasn't help. It was just a continuation of the same one-way investment they'd been making for 2 decades. I wasn't their neighbor. I was the unfortunate overhead cost of their primary venture. Brad. I looked at the bank statements I had used for the HOA ledger. I saw it with new eyes. The $4,500 emergency golf cart repair I'd sent in 2017. It was wired on April 10th. On April 11th, Brad posted a photo of his newly rebuilt cart for the charity race. My money hadn't fixed a neighborhood asset. It had funded my replacement. I had the past. I had the pattern. Now I needed the shield. On Monday morning, I didn't call my personal lawyer. I called Naomi's corporate counsel, the litigation partners at our high-rise law firm. Lena, the partner, a sharp woman named Era, said, Naomi told me about the investor situation. Good job shutting that down. What's next? This isn't a corporate matter, I said. It's personal, but I need a corporate solution. The board believes they have a future claim on my success. I have a ledger of their absences and a ledger of my payments. I want to make sure they can never ever act on that belief. Era was silent for a moment. They're harassing you commercially. Brad's email to Keystone proved that they've crossed the line from a personal nuisance to a business tort. We have an opening. What kind of opening? You don't want to sue them for money, she said. That's messy and validating. You want to sue them for peace? We can file for a declaratory judgment. Preemptive strike. We're not asking for damages. We are asking the court to declare the rights of the parties. We will petition a judge to legally affirm as a matter of law that no verbal promise, neighborhood relationship, or emotional investment entitles them to any portion of Haven Glow, your personal assets, or any future earnings. We will ask for a permanent injunction barring them and their agents from contacting you, your investors, or your suppliers regarding any financial matter. It's a legal document that says you have no claim. It's an anti-gaslighting order backed by the power of contempt of court. I felt a profound cold sense of relief. After I sent the proof of presence drive to Era, my lawyer, a new kind of silence descended. It was no longer the silence of absence or the quiet before a storm. It was the charged humming silence of a server processing a massive data load. It was the silence of a legal case being built, brick by verifiable brick. I had presented my evidence. Now the other side would have to respond not to my emotion but to Era's discovery motions. Their first move was not legal. It was strategic. They retreated from the battlefield of facts and regrouped on the familiar treacherous terrain of sentiment. 2 weeks after I filed the petition for a declaratory judgment, package arrived at my office. It was a large flat envelope thick with expensive cardstock. Maya placed it on my desk with a pair of tongs, half joking. Potential biohazard. I slid it open. It was an invitation to Brad and Tiffany's wedding. Engraved, cream-colored, with lettering so ornate it was barely legible. The venue was the Brown Palace Hotel in Denver. An opulent historic choice far beyond their means, a clear signal that they expected a benefactor. Tucked inside was a smaller personal note handwritten, in Karen's looping cursive on a card embossed with a single E. Lena, we know things have been difficult. This is a time for community, a time for healing. Please let this be our new beginning. The word healing was a weapon. They weren't offering an apology. They were offering me a chance to absolve them. The invitation wasn't a request for my presence. It was a summon to my surrender. I placed it on the corner of my desk. A beautiful ticking bomb. The next salvo arrived 3 days later. A courier delivered a heavy, professionally wrapped box to my townhouse. There was no note, just my address in Karen's hand. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a leather-bound photo album. The Evergreen Meadows Memories. I opened it with a feeling of cold dread. The photos were all of us. Younger Brad on his first golf cart, me on a swing set, but there were post-it notes stuck to certain pages. Tiny yellow flags of curated history. My fingers stopped on a photo of a community Christmas, from what looked like the late 90s. The post-it read, "Remember this, Lena? Christmas 1999. We were all snowed in together. Such a happy time." I remembered Christmas 1999. I remembered it with crystalline clarity of a fever. I had been 9 years old when I moved in. I had come down with a brutal case of influenza on Christmas Eve. The board had non-refundable tickets for a ski trip to Aspen. Brad, 6 and healthy, was excited to go. They had left me. They hadn't left me alone, not technically. They had hired a sullen teenage babysitter who spent the entire day on the phone with her boyfriend. I remembered lying on the sofa, shivering, watching the snow fall outside the window. I remembered the sitter handing me a can of lukewarm ginger ale and a dose of cough syrup before disappearing into the den. They had called once, a crackly call from the ski lodge. Their voices bright with the fun I was missing. That was their happy time. My feverish solitude was their community memory. This wasn't a memento. This was a rewrite. It was a clumsy, desperate attempt to gaslight me, to overwrite the data in my head with their preferred narrative. They weren't just denying my experience. They were trying to erase it. I closed the album and slid it back into its box. I didn't feel angry. I felt validated. Their clumsiness was a symptom of their panic. The panic escalated. The next text came from Brad. The vice president's blood pressure is through the roof. The doctor says it's stress. This legal thing you're doing is putting his health at risk. You need to think about what you're doing to this neighborhood before my wedding. The compassion play, the health scare, the most ancient, potent weapon in the emotional manipulator's arsenal. It was so transparent, so textbook. It was almost insulting. The vice president's health was now my responsibility. My legal right to protect my business was now a threat to his life. I screenshotted the text and forwarded it to one word. Documented. That evening Graham called. "I'm guessing the pre-wedding charm offensive has begun," he said, his voice a calm anchor. They sent a memory book with fabricated memories and a guilt trip about the vice president's aorta. I said, the words sounding absurd as I spoke them. "Ah, the compassion play," he said, giving the tactic its name. "It's a classic. They can't win on the facts, so they try to win on the feelings. They're trying to make your boundaries feel like cruelty. It's working," I admitted, surprised by my own honesty. "A small part of me feels like a monster." "That's the part they trained," Graham said quietly. "Your only defense is to stop treating this like a neighborhood matter and start treating it like a negotiation with a hostile party. What are your terms? His question cut through the fog of guilt. Terms? Of course. I spent my days negotiating terms with suppliers, with distributors, with investors. Why was I treating this differently? After we hung up, I opened a new document. I titled it Terms of Contact. I wasn't writing as a resident. I was writing as the CEO of my own life. The points were simple, clear, and non-negotiable. Communication protocol. All communication will be conducted via email with a 24-hour response window. No unscheduled calls or texts. No surprise visits to my home or office. Financial firewall. There will be no discussion of money, loans, gifts, sponsorships, or investments of any kind. All such inquiries will terminate the conversation. Venue neutrality. Any in-person interaction will occur in a public place for a pre-agreed length of time. Respect for autonomy. My personal and professional decisions are my own. They are not open for debate or subject to board approval. Disparaging comments, either public or private, will result in an immediate cessation of contact. I read the list. It was cold. It was clinical. It was the most honest thing I had ever written about the HOA. I copied the points into a new email. I kept the language neutral, devoid of accusation. I wasn't assigning blame. I was establishing rules of engagement. I sent it to Karen, the vice president, and Brad. The reply this time came from Karen. It was swift and dripping with martyrdom. To place conditions on your own neighborhood is the coldest thing I have ever seen. This is not how a community works. This is not neighborly. I looked at her words. This is not neighborly. Maybe she was right. But it wasn't hate either. It was something new. It was a contract. You're right. It's not neighborly. These are the conditions under which respect can exist. Neighborly love has not worked. Let's try respect. The next communication came from Brad 2 days later, and for the first time it was a negotiation. Okay, I get it. You want rules? Fine. Here's the deal. Tiffany is a wreck. The wedding is in 3 weeks. No business talk. No money talk from anyone. I will personally guarantee it. If you will come to the wedding just for the ceremony and the cocktail hour, 3 hours, that's it for Tiffany. So she doesn't have to answer questions about where my neighbor is. It was the first honest thing he had ever said to me. He wasn't asking for my love or my approval. He was asking for a temporary ceasefire to manage his own social optics. It was a transaction, and a transaction I could understand. 3 hours. I will arrive at the start of the ceremony and leave at the end of the cocktail hour. If anyone, you, Karen, any guest, broaches the subject of business or money, I will leave immediately. Agreed. Brad agreed. I had a deal. But a deal with an unreliable party requires preparation. My next meeting was with Naomi and Sarah, my PR director. I'm attending a neighborhood event, I told them. That has a high potential for conflict. Brad has promised a truce, but I don't trust it. Naomi nodded, already in risk management mode. We'll have a car and driver on standby at the Brown Palace for the entire 3-hour window. You text a code word solstice, and he'll be at the front entrance in 90 seconds. Sarah chimed in. And if anyone tries to create a scene, if a cousin with a camera phone tries to bait you into an argument, your response is 1 sentence and 1 sentence only. I'm not going to comment on that. Then you turn and walk away. You find the driver. You do not engage. We'll handle any social media fallout. They were treating my neighbor's wedding like a hostile shareholder meeting. It was absurd, and it was the smartest thing I had ever done. That night Graham stopped by on his way back from a research trip. I told him about the deal. He listened, his expression unreadable. We stood on the balcony, the city lights painting streaks below us. 3 hours, I said, more to myself than to him. It feels like I'm preparing for a diplomatic mission in a war zone. He took a sip of his tea. You are. I leaned on the railing, the cold metal a comfort. Is this what it's going to be like forever? Contracts and terms and exit strategies. He looked at me, his gaze steady. Maybe for a while. But you're missing the point, Lena. You're asking their permission to have boundaries, the email, the negotiation. It's all you trying to get them to agree to your terms. He set his mug down. Enforcing a boundary doesn't require their permission, he said. It only requires your consistency. I looked out at the river of lights. He was right. I had the terms. I had the exit strategy. I had the legal filings. I had everything I needed. The invitation was still on my desk. It wasn't a summon anymore. It was a test, my test, and for the first time I felt ready to take it. The atrium of the Brown Palace Hotel is a monument to Gilded Age optimism. It's 9 stories of ornate ironwork, balconies dripping with filigree, all under a stained glass ceiling that bathes the entire lobby in a warm amber sanctimonious light. It smells of old money, faint cigar smoke, and lilies. It was the perfect stage for a drama. 3 hours, I said to Graham, my voice barely a whisper. 3 hours, he confirmed. He wasn't in his usual tweed jacket. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit. When I had asked him to be my +1, I'd been clear. This isn't a date. It's an allied mission. He had simply nodded. I'm a good ally. We walked in. The effect was immediate. It was not a gasp. It was a sudden pressurized drop in the room's ambient sound. The string quartet playing something bright and forgettable by Vivaldi seemed to get louder as the murmur of conversation died. Every head turned. Cousins, aunts, old neighborhood friends. I saw their eyes wide with an almost primal curiosity. They had seen Brad's Facebook posts. They had heard the whispers. I was the ungrateful resident, the cold-hearted neighbor, the one who had, according to neighborhood lore, tried to sue her own board. And I had brought a stranger. I kept my head high, my expression neutral. I was not here to fight. I was not here to apologize. I was here to fulfill a 3-hour contractual obligation. We moved through the gaze, a tangible thing that felt like walking through cobwebs. First, the gift table. It was piled high with silver boxes from Tiffany's and Crate and Barrel. Our gift in simple brown paper wrapping looked almost severe by comparison. Inside was a hardcover copy of The Intelligent Investor, a detailed guide to financial planning, and a crisp bank-issued check. The amount was $500, not nothing, but not the $280,000 Brad had demanded. It was a perfectly appropriate, perfectly polite, perfectly cold fulfillment of a social duty. It was the gift of a distant acquaintance. We took our seats. The ceremony was a blur of white lace and mumbled vows. Tiffany, Brad's fiancée, looked beautiful and genuinely happy, seemingly oblivious to the financial and emotional warfare that underpinned her celebration. When Brad said the words "in sickness and in health," I had to consciously stop myself from looking at the vice president. The I-dos were said. The polite applause echoed up to the golden ceiling. The ceasefire was over. The cocktail hour began. This was the part one had dreaded. This was the unstructured social minefield. Water, I said to Graham. Good call, he replied. We found a defensible position near a massive fern, our backs to a marble pillar. The strategy was simple. See them before they see us. We lasted for minutes. Brad materialized. A glass of champagne in each hand. He was flush with victory. The star of his own show. He handed a glass to Graham. Glad you could make it, man. He turned to me, his smile wide and practiced. So things are looking really good for the national circuit. We just got a line on a new kart engine. The truce broken in under 30 seconds. I didn't let him finish. I looked past him at his new wife, who was laughing with her bridesmaids. Brad, I said, my voice quiet, cutting through his enthusiasm. Today is only about your marriage. Tiffany looks beautiful. Congratulations. His smile didn't vanish, but it froze. The light in his eyes, the transactional gleam, went flat. He had hit the first wall, the one I had outlined in my email. No business. He looked at me, looked at Graham, and seemed to recalibrate. The charm offensive had failed. He didn't have a backup plan, right? Yeah, he stammered. Thanks. Glad you came. He turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving the untouched champagne in Graham's hand. One down, Graham murmured, placing the glass on a passing waiter's tray. The next confrontation was never going to be so direct. Karen didn't use battering rams. She used poison. She found me while I was looking at the intricate ironwork on the balcony railing. Graham had politely stepped away to admire the architecture, a clear move to give her the space she thought she needed. Lena. Her voice was low. I turned. She was wearing a pale blue dress. Her hair perfect. Her face a mask of tragic maternal suffering. She smelled like Chanel No. 5, a scent I associated with a lifetime of her leaving for parties. She didn't look at me. She looked out at the atrium. I have to tell you, she whispered as if she were confessing something. Those emails, that legal thing, your father and I, we are just so hurt to have our own neighbor. She let the sentence hang, unfinished, a hook baited with guilt. I did not take it. I did not apologize. I did not defend. I simply stated my terms. The ones I had written in the dead of night. Karen, I said, my voice just as quiet, but with a different quality, not of pain, but of clarity. I will always be there when I am truly needed. If you are sick, if the vice president is in the hospital, if there is a true crisis, I will be on the first flight. I paused, then delivered the foundation. I will not be there when I'm just financially needed. That's not a crisis. It's a transaction, and I'm not available for it anymore. I watched her face. This was the moment. She was supposed to cry. She was supposed to accuse me of being cold, of being ungrateful. That was the script. But she didn't. She just stared. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. The hurt look faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine, profound confusion. She had no response. The lines I had drawn were not emotional. They were logical, and she had no weapons to fight logic. She looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. She wasn't seeing her difficult neighbor. She was seeing a stranger. Oh, she said. It was a small empty sound. And then she turned, her shoulders stiff, and walked away. She didn't push. She didn't fight. She retreated. It was the first boundary of my life that had ever held. I let out a breath and turned back to the railing. Across the atrium on the far balcony, I saw the vice president. He was alone, holding a glass of whiskey. He had been watching the entire exchange. He had seen me. He had seen Karen's retreat. He didn't look angry. He didn't look sad. He looked uncertain. His entire life he had operated on a simple system. Brad was the asset to invest in. I was the utility to pay for it. He had just watched the utility shut off its own power. The ATM was closed. The ledger was real. His world built on a foundation of my compliance was tilting, and for the first time he looked like he wasn't sure he could regain his footing. Graham returned to my side, a fresh glass of water in his hand. He said nothing. He just stood with me. We watched the party, a silent allied front. I looked at my watch. 2:47 p.m. Our 3 hours were up. The contract was fulfilled. It's time, I said. Cars at the north entrance, Graham said. We didn't say goodbye to anyone. We didn't look for Brad or Tiffany. We didn't search for Karen or the vice president. We just moved. We walked across the marble floor, past the string quartet, past the chattering guests. As we neared the massive gilded archway of the exit, I felt a gaze on my back. I paused. But I did not turn. In the periphery I saw him, Brad. He was standing near the bar talking to his golf buddies. He had seen us leaving. He stopped his conversation. He watched me walk away. And then slowly he raised his glass of champagne. It wasn't a warm toast. It wasn't a threat. It was something else. A concession. A stalemate. It was a look that said, I don't understand you, but I see you. It was not the look of a dismissive neighbor. It was the look of a confused, equal opponent. We stepped through the archway. The heavy, perfumed air of the ballroom was instantly replaced by the sharp, cold, refrigerated air of the hotel lobby. It was a sterile, clean smell, like new fabric. The driver was waiting, just as Naomi had promised. We got into the black sedan. The door closed with a solid, satisfying thud. To the airport. Please, Graham said to the driver. I leaned my head back against the cool leather. I did not look back at the hotel. The next morning I was back in my office. The wedding felt like a fever dream, a scene from a movie I had watched, not one I had lived. My inbox was full as always. Projections, supply chain reports, marketing briefs, and one email from Diane Hiller. Diane was my oldest mentor, a retired tech CEO who sat on 3 major boards. Subject, keynote. The ethos of leadership. Lena, I've been following the HG Fellows launch. Brilliant. It's time the world heard more from you. I'm chairing the Women in Business Summit in Aspen this spring. I want you to give the closing keynote. I don't want the usual how I succeeded speech. I want the real stuff. I want you to talk about what it costs and how to build a company that can withstand anything. Let's call the topic business ethics, personal boundaries, and the foundation of a resilient enterprise. Are you in? I looked at the subject line, business ethics, personal boundaries. I thought of the ledgers, the voicemails, the velvet curtain. I typed my reply. Diane, I'm in. I have a lot to say on the subject. I hit send. The 3-hour truce at the Brown Palace had been exactly that. A temporary halt in hostilities, not a peace treaty. My attendance was a calculated fulfillment of a contract, and my departure was the signal that the war, having been paused, was now back on. I had expected them to retreat, to reconsider, perhaps to fall into a wounded silence. I had miscalculated. I had underestimated their audacity. I had failed to understand that to them my boundary was not a foundation. It was a declaration of war. And in response, they had hired their own general. It happened on the Monday morning 2 weeks after the wedding. I was in my office approving the Q4 marketing budget. Maya buzzed me. Lena, a courier from Venable Strauss just dropped this. It's marked legal confidential. Hand-delivered to Lena Harper only. Venable Strauss. I didn't know the name. It wasn't my firm. It was a thick 9 by 12 FedEx envelope. It was too heavy to be a simple letter. I signed for it, my hand steady. I slid the cardboard tab open. Inside there was no personal note, no looping cursive, just a 20-page spiral-bound document on heavy cream-colored legal paper. The cover letter was blunt. Formal demand for compensation and restitution. Whitaker versus Harper. My eyes scanned the first paragraph. It was from a lawyer retained by and representing Karen Whitaker and the vice president. It accused me of breach of neighborhood contract, unjust enrichment, and infliction of emotional distress. And then I saw the number. They were formally, legally, demanding payment of $312,000 plus 6% interest, compounded annually, retroactive to my move-in date. My breath hitched. This was it. The hook I had written about in my private thoughts, the absurd metaphor, had just become a legal pleading. They had done it. They had sent me the invoice. I turned the page. Exhibit A, itemized schedule of emotional investment. My blood went Arctic cold. They had broken it down. They had itemized the 15 neighborhood milestones they had missed. From my first product launch to my 34th birthday, they had assigned a value to each one. Loss of neighborhood consortium, board council, and celebratory investment, 15 instances, 20,800 per instance, total 312,000. They had monetized their own absence. They were arguing in a legal document that they deserved to be paid for the very events they never attended. They were invoicing me for the unlit candles. Lena, Naomi was standing in my doorway, holding her coffee mug. She must have seen the blood drain from my face. I held up a hand, silencing her. I turned to Exhibit B, proof of neighborhood support. It was a series of photographs presented as evidence of their consistent presence. I saw the Christmas 1999 photo, the one from the memory album they'd sent, the one where I was sick, alone. Only in this version I was there smiling, looking healthy, standing in front of the tree. I saw the move-in anniversary photo, the one where I sat alone with the melted candles. In this version, Karen and the vice president were standing behind me, their hands on my shoulders, beaming. I stopped. I brought the page closer to my eyes. I wasn't just a founder. I was a digital native founder. My entire company was built on iterating pixel-perfect designs. My eyes were trained. I saw it. On the move-in anniversary photo around Karen's arm, there was a faint hazy outline, a subtle pixelation that didn't match the grain of the original Polaroid. On the Christmas photo, the lighting on my face was flat, inconsistent with the shadows cast by the tree's fairy lights. It was a clone stamp tool. It was a bad, amateurish Photoshop job. They hadn't just lied. They hadn't just fabricated memories. They had submitted fraudulent evidence in a legal demand. The sheer, clumsy, insulting stupidity of it broke the spell. The shock vanished, replaced by a glacial fury. I didn't call Karen. I didn't call the vice president. I picked up my phone and speed dialed. Era, it's Lena. They did it. Did what? She asked, her voice instantly sharp. They sent the invoice, 312,000 for 15 missed milestones. And I said, a grim smile touching my lips, they attached faked photographs as evidence. There was a profound silence on the line. Then Era let out a single sharp laugh. Oh, Lena, she said, and her voice was filled with the sound of a predator that has just seen its prey walk directly into a trap. This isn't a lawsuit. This is a gift. They've just handed us their heads. Scan and send it to me now. I scanned every page. I sent the file. Era called me back in 10 minutes. We're filing, she said, her voice a rapid-fire staccato. We are no longer just petitioning for a declaratory judgment. We are filing for a temporary restraining order based on commercial harassment. And we are petitioning for sanctions based on their submission of fraudulent documents. They didn't just confirm their intent. They've committed an act of fraud. What do I do? Nothing, she said. You've already done it. You built the ark. Now I'm going to use it. Era filed our response that afternoon. It was an avalanche. Our petition didn't just ask for a judgment. Proved it. We attached the proof of presence drive. We attached the original move-in anniversary Polaroid showing the empty chairs and the melted candles. We attached the time-stamped iCloud voicemail of Karen canceling her attendance at my investor pitch to attend Brad's golf tournament in Oklahoma. We attached the corresponding time-stamped Facebook screenshot of them at Oklahoma. We attached the 15 board reports noting neighborhood absence. We attached the doorbell camera video from my neighbor Marge Neely showing me on my 33rd anniversary alone listening to the live stream of their party for Brad. We attached the vice president's threatening text and, as the final exhibit, we attached their 312,000 invoice. We didn't need to argue. The evidence argued for us. The escalation was immediate. The battle was no longer just legal. It was commercial. Naomi appeared at my door the next morning. The firewall is working, she said grimly. She was referring to the legal@havenglow.com email address I had set up. What is it? It's Brad. He's not just posting on Facebook anymore. He's contacting our suppliers. She turned her laptop around. The inbox for the legal monitored team was filling up. Emails from Brad sent from his Community First Golf account to our primary glass manufacturer in Ohio, to our organic lavender farm, to our shipping logistics partner. The message was the same. As a concerned neighborhood member, I feel it's my duty to inform you that Lena Harper is engaged in a hostile legal action against her own board. Her leadership is unstable and we believe she is putting Haven Glow at significant risk. You should reconsider your contracts. He was trying to poison my supply chain. This was no longer a neighborhood squabble. This was tortious interference. Era, I said, forwarding the entire inbox. Her email reply came in seconds. We're adding them to the TRO petition. He's proving our harassment claim in real time. Keep working. The court filing became public record at 4 p.m. By 4:30, my PR director Sarah was in my office, her face pale. The Austin Business Journal just called. They have the filing. They have the 312,000 number. They're running a story. Good, I said. Sarah stared. Good. Yes. We're not hiding. What's our statement? She took a deep breath, her professionalism clicking back into place. We prepared this. Haven Glow Organics is experiencing its strongest quarter to date. We are focused on our customers, our Q4 expansion, and our commitment to sustainable, effective products. We do not comment on private matters or pending litigation. Run it, I said, on all channels. It's the only thing we will say. The story broke that evening. The narrative they had tried to control, the ungrateful resident, was instantly obliterated by the facts. The 312,000 invoice was the headline. The faked photos were the punchline. Brad, in his infinite arrogance, had forgotten one crucial thing. His own reputation was built on a flimsy foundation of sponsorships. He was a brand ambassador, and he had just publicly demonstrated his character. The Business Journal story was picked up by a local sports blog that covered the golf circuit. They linked Brad's Community First post to his emails to my suppliers. By Thursday morning, a comment appeared on that sports blog. It was from a PR account for Rocket Fuel, the energy drink that was Brad's primary sponsor. Rocket Fuel Official. We are deeply concerned by the reports of this conduct. Rocket Fuel supports integrity and professionalism. We are immediately reevaluating our Q1 sponsorship contracts pending a full review. He had tried to burn my fortress. Instead, he had set his own golf cart on fire. The final predictable salvo came that night. My phone, which I had set to do not disturb, lit up with a notification voicemail from Karen. I let it go. I waited an hour. I listened to it in the silence of my townhouse. It wasn't the angry voice from the fishbowl meeting. It was the weeping, broken voice from the Oklahoma voicemail. It was a performance of profound weaponized victimhood. Lena, a lawsuit? She sobbed, her voice catching. How could you do this? Taking your own neighborhood to court. We just wanted to be made whole. We're your board. Don't you understand what this is doing to the vice president? His heart. Oh, Lena, how could you be so cruel? Cruel, ungrateful, cold, the old words. I listened to the recording. I felt nothing. It was just noise. It was the fog machine trying one last desperate time to obscure the facts. I did not reply to her. I opened a new voice memo. I pressed record. Era, I said, my voice calm and clear. I have just received the expected voicemail from Karen attempting to emotionally leverage me into dropping the suit. For the record, my position is unchanged. They sent a fraudulent invoice for $312,000. They contacted my investors. They are attempting to interfere with my supply chain. This is not a neighborhood dispute. It is the necessary defense of my enterprise. I am not seeking revenge. I am seeking clarity. I am choosing a definitive end. I hit stop. I emailed the file to my lawyer. It was my affidavit. Era called the next morning. They've been served. They're petitioning for an emergency mediation. The judge has scheduled a preliminary hearing. We're on the docket in 3 weeks. The local news picked it up. The speculation was rampant. I received over 70 interview requests. I declined them all. I sat in my glass-walled office, the business of Haven glow humming around me. I was silent. I was still. The case was built. The evidence was filed. The fog was gone. Now all that was left was the judgment. The 3 weeks leading up to the preliminary hearing were the quietest, loudest time of my life. The quiet was external. My phone stopped ringing. The legal inbox was still getting Brad's frantic, now deflected emails, but my personal world was sealed. The team at Haven Glow was heads down, insulated by our holding statement. We were a fortress, focused on Q4 projections. The loud was the rest of the world. The story of the $312,000 invoice for missed milestones had become a minor national obsession. It was a perfect toxic cocktail of neighborhood, money, and entitlement. I was painted as everything from a cold-hearted capitalist shrew to a feminist icon of boundaries. Karen was the tragic, manipulated president. The vice president was a delusional victim. Brad was a cautionary tale of spoiled sons. The noise was irrelevant. I was in my townhouse, which had become a legal war room. I reviewed Era's filings. I reread my own statements. I stared at the data in my proof of presence drive. The facts were on my side. Then, the night before the hearing, the case pivoted. It was 9 p.m. I was drinking tea, reviewing the final schedule with Era on the phone. They'll try to make it emotional. Lena, she was saying. They will weep. They will talk about the vice president's heart. You will state the facts. You do not react. I understand, I said. As I spoke, I heard a sound at my townhouse door. Not a knock. A soft scrape, like a package being slid across the welcome mat. Hold on, Era. I walked to the door, peeped through the hole. The hallway was empty. I opened the door. On the mat was a plain 9 by 12 manila envelope. No address, no stamp, no courier label. Someone had placed it here by hand. My pulse quickened. Someone just left a package at my door. Anonymously. Do not touch it, Lena. It could be anything. It's not a bomb. Era, I said, my voice dry. It's paper. It's heavy. Okay, she said, her voice tight. Put me on speakerphone. Open it. Wear gloves if you have them. I put on the latex gloves I used for testing product formulations. I slid the metal clasp and appended the envelope's contents onto my kitchen counter. It was not a coherent document. It was a collection of loose papers, like the contents of a desk drawer had been swept into an envelope, and a single black USB flash drive. What do you see? Era asked. Paper. A lot of it. And a USB. Check the papers first. The first thing I saw was a sheet of yellow legal paper. It was a draft. A list. 19th milestone, missed launch. 20th, missed Paris trip. 21st, missed finals. 22nd, missed graduation. It was a list of my milestones. It was an early handwritten draft of the $312,000 HOA invoice. But the most chilling part wasn't the list itself. It was the handwriting, Karen's, and it was the date scribbled at the top. June 2015. 5 years before the $35 million valuation. 5 years before the Forbes article. This was not a recent act of wounded rage. This was a long-term plan. At the bottom of the page, she had circled a preliminary total and written a small triumphant note in the margin. To claim back later. My God! I whispered. Era. They've been keeping this ledger for years. What? Read it to me. I read her the note. Era was silent. This is no longer defense. Lena, she said, her voice arctic. This is premeditated extortion. They weren't invoicing you for their pain. They were invoicing you for their investment. They were waiting for you to become profitable. There's more, I said. I picked up the USB drive. This is a flash drive. It could be anything. Plug it into an isolated laptop. Lena, not your main one. I retrieved an old laptop I kept for travel. I booted it up offline and plugged in the drive. One folder, originals. I clicked it. My breath caught. It was them. The move-in anniversary party. The Christmas 1999 photo. But these were the source files, the original high-resolution scans of the Polaroids they had submitted to the court, the ones their lawyer had filed as evidence. But these weren't the photoshopped versions. In these I was alone. The move-in anniversary photo showed the empty chairs and the melted candles. The Christmas 1999 photo showed the empty sofa, the ginger ale, the fever. The metadata on the files was pristine, showing they had been scanned and saved in 2016, long before the lawsuit. Whoever sent this package had just handed me the definitive proof of their legal fraud. Era, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I have the originals, the unfaked photos with metadata. Whoever this is, Era said, is burning your neighborhood to the ground. What else is in the envelope? I turned back to the pile. A printout of an email from the vice president's old AOL account. The recipient was a friend of his, someone from the country club. The date was 2011, the week of my investor pitch, the one they skipped for Oklahoma. His friend had apparently asked if I would be upset. The vice president's reply, "Don't worry about it. She'll be fine. She's used to it." The casual written confirmation of their willful neglect. The admission that my absence was a feature of their lives, not a bug. Next, a sworn affidavit, not from Marge Neely, from another neighbor, a Mr. Henderson, who lived 2 doors down from my townhouse. I, William Henderson, do solemnly swear I lived next to the Harper residence for 20 years. On at least 5 occasions I personally witnessed Lena Harper sitting on her front steps alone with a cupcake on what I later learned was her milestone anniversary. The board's car was often gone. I witnessed her blow out the candles by herself. It was notarized. And then the final piece of paper, the one that made me sit down. It was a bank document, a printed transaction history for a 501c3 nonprofit organization, the Texas Youth Golf Club, Brad's Club, and a corresponding tax document, a Schedule A from Karen and the Vice President's 2018 tax return. It showed a charitable deduction for $5,000. The memo line on the bank statement for the corresponding donation read, "Annual donation in support of Lena Harper." They hadn't just neglected me. They hadn't just invoiced me. They had used my name in support of Lena Harper to make a donation to Brad's Golf Club and then filed it as a charitable tax write-off. This wasn't just gaslighting. This wasn't just emotional manipulation. This was wire fraud. Era, I said, my voice dead calm. They've been using my name to get tax deductions for Brad's hobby. I heard the sound of Era typing furiously. Okay, Lena, stop. Do not move. I am sending a bonded courier to your townhouse right now. I want that envelope and everything in it. Do not tell me who you think sent it. I don't want to know. It was delivered to you anonymously. It is not fruit of the poisonous tree. It is admissible. We just won. The courier arrived at 10 p.m. I handed him the package. The war was over. All that was left was the surrender. The next morning my office was a hive of activity. Era had filed the new evidence under seal. The game had changed. And then a new unexpected front opened. Naomi, my CFO, walked into my office. She wasn't smiling. Lena, I've been monitoring Brad's brand, Community First Golf, since Rocket Fuel pulled their sponsorship and he's desperate. He just launched a new line of merchandise on his website. T-shirts, hoodies. She turned her laptop around. The t-shirt was black. In the center was a stylized faded image of a little girl with pigtails sitting on a swing. Underneath it the words Community First Golf and Ride or Die. I stared at the girl. My stomach churned. Naomi, that's me. It was a photo from the memory album they had sent. Me, age 6. He was using my childhood likeness to sell t-shirts without my permission. He had commercially misused an image of me. I looked at Naomi. I looked at the t-shirt. This was the final stupid, arrogant mistake. He had just brought my company into it. Era, I said, hitting the speakerphone. I'm here. Era's voice was sharp. Naomi is sending you a link. My neighbor is using my childhood photo to sell merchandise. Misappropriation of likeness for commercial gain. Era snapped. That's a new one. He's trying to trade on your fame from the Forbes article. What do? We don't add it to the neighborhood case, she said, her voice suddenly cunning. We create a new case. This isn't Lena Harper the resident. This is Haven Glow Organics the corporation. Our PR strategy just locked in. We're sending a cease and desist from the company right now by noon. Community First Golf had a CD from Era's firm demanding an immediate halt to all sales, a full accounting of all profits, and a public retraction. Brad was now fighting on two fronts, one against me personally, a case he had already lost, and one against my $35 million company, a case he could never afford. The final call of the day came from Diane Hiller, my mentor. Era told me about the package. She's smart. She wants to bypass the public hearing. She's pushing for a binding mediation. And their lawyer, who now knows his clients committed fraud, is going to jump at the chance to avoid sanctions. A mediation. Not just any, Diane said. This can't be a therapy session, Lena. This needs to be a liquidation. I made a call. A retired federal judge, Anna Sharma. She's who corporations use when they want to settle a hostile takeover. She doesn't care about feelings. She follows the money. Era's office just called. They've agreed, tomorrow 10 a.m. Judge Sharma. Good, Diane said. You're ready. What are you going to say? I looked down at the document I had been drafting all morning. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't an accusation. It was a closing statement. I have it, I said. It's 264 words. Does it have anger? No. Does it have pain? No. What does it have? A foundation, I said. And a firewall. It's not a request. It's a statement of terms. It's the last thing I ever planned to say to them. That's all you need, she said. Go finish it. I hung up the phone. The city lights were coming on, but my office was dark. I looked at the 264 words on my screen. Every fuse that had been lit, the invoice, the fakes, the fraud, the theft of my own face all led to this. This was the bolt locking the door tomorrow. I wasn't going to a hearing. I was going to a signing. The mediation room was not a courtroom. It was a sterile beige box on the 27th floor of a downtown high-rise. It smelled of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. There was no judge's bench, just a long polished mahogany table. Judge Anna Sharma sat at the head. She was not in robes. She wore a simple severe black suit and her eyes missed nothing. At one end of the table sat Era and me. At the other sat Karen, the vice president, and their terrified lawyer. Brad was there too, sitting slightly behind them, his leg vibrating so fast it shook the floor. A single red light on a microphone in the center of the table confirmed we were on the record. Their lawyer, a man named Strauss, began. He spoke for 10 minutes, his voice resonant with a false, buttery sympathy. He spoke of the sanctity of the neighborhood bond. He spoke of board investment and moral obligations. He painted a picture of two loving leaders who had poured their lives into their residents only to be cast aside. My clients, he concluded, his voice trembling with manufactured emotion, are not seeking profit. They are seeking restitution. Restitution for the 15 years of emotional investment they made, an investment their resident is now unjustly enriched by. The $312,000 is not a price. It is not a buy. It is a balancing of the scales. He slid the fraudulent invoice, now pristine in a plastic evidence sleeve, across the table. Judge Sharma looked at the invoice. Then she looked at Era. Ms. Carr, your response. Era did not make a speech. She placed 5 thick 3-ring binders on the table. The sound was a series of solid definitive thuds that echoed in the quiet room. Your Honor, Era said, her voice clear and cold. We agree that the scales must be balanced. We will now present the actual ledger. She stood. She opened the first binder. Exhibit A, a handwritten draft of the defendant's $312,000 invoice, authored by Mrs. Whitaker, dated June 2015, 5 years before my client's company was valued. We draw your attention to the handwritten note in the margin. To claim back later. I watched Karen's face. The color drained from it. Her lawyer, Strauss, snatched the document handed to him, his eyes bugging. Exhibit B, Era continued. The original unretouched Polaroid photographs from my client's move-in anniversary and Christmas of 1999 showing her alone, alongside the fraudulent photoshopped versions the defendants submitted in their legal demand. We have included a sworn affidavit from a digital forensics expert confirming the clone stamping and metadata. The vice president made a low choking sound. Exhibit C, the original voicemail timestamped from Mrs. Whitaker canceling her attendance at my client's investor pitch to attend a golf tournament in Oklahoma. Exhibit D, the corresponding timestamped social media post from Mr. Whitaker at Oklahoma on that same day captioned, "Nothing more important than supporting your neighborhood leaders." Exhibit E, the notarized affidavit from my client's former neighbor Mr. Henderson attesting to witnessing my client celebrate her anniversaries alone on her doorstep for 5 consecutive years. Era let the silence hang, then opened the final binder. And finally, Exhibit F, the defendant's 2018 tax returns and the bank statements for their son's 501c3. They show conclusively that my clients fraudulently used my client's name in support of Lena Harper to claim a $5,000 charitable tax deduction for their son's golf hobby. Strauss, their lawyer, looked like he was going to be sick. He was staring at the tax return. He looked at Karen and the vice president with an expression of pure betrayal. They hadn't told him. Judge Sharma picked up the single yellow legal sheet, the handwritten draft from 2015. She read the note at the bottom, "To claim back later," out loud. She then lifted her gaze, not to the lawyers, but to Karen and the vice president. Mr. Whitaker, Mrs. Whitaker. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. This document is not a memory. It is a debt plan. You weren't grieving your absence. You were planning to cash in on your resident. The silence that followed was absolute. Karen's mask of the wounded neighborhood mother had shattered. She was just a woman caught. The vice president seemed to shrink into his suit. Strauss scrambled. He threw his hands up, a gesture of complete surrender. Your Honor, please. This is a terrible misunderstanding. A private neighborhood matter that has escalated. He shot a venomous look at Karen and the vice president. My clients are, of course, prepared to withdraw their claim immediately in exchange for a simple joint media statement, a post about healing and moving forward. No admission of wrongdoing, just a misunderstanding. Era looked at me. I looked at Judge Sharma. No, I said. It was the first word I had spoken. The room turned to me. No joint post. No misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding here. There is only clarity. I pushed a document drafted by Era across the table. This is the consent order we are filing. It is not negotiable. Era spoke. My client demands the following. 1. A full and permanent withdrawal of their $312,000 claim. 2. A permanent injunction barring you, your agents, or your children from contacting any investor, supplier, or employee of Haven Glow Organics. 3. An immediate cease and desist in perpetuity on the use of my client's likeness, personal or professional. All Community First Golf merchandise featuring her image will be destroyed. 4. All disparaging posts on all social media platforms will be deleted within 24 hours. Strauss was nodding. Yes, of course. I'm not finished, I said. I looked at Karen. And one more thing, a separate notarized letter. In it, you will both admit that your absences from my life, including the 15 milestones referenced in your invoice, were your personal choices, not an emotional investment to be claimed back. That's not, Strauss began. It is, Era cut in, and there is the separate matter of Haven Glow Organics v. Community First Golf regarding misappropriation of likeness. A representative from Rocket Fuel, she said, glancing at the door, is, as I understand it, waiting in the lobby for the outcome of this mediation before finalizing the termination of Mr. Brad Whitaker's contract. Brad, who had been frozen, suddenly snapped to life. He was pale, sweating. He looked at his parents, his eyes wide with panic. The game was over. Every second was costing him his future. Mom, Dad, just sign it, he hissed. Sign the damn thing now. Judge Sharma, who had been watching this all with a kind of clinical detachment, finally spoke. She looked past the lawyers, past Brad, directly at Karen and the vice president. Love is not a negotiating tool, she said, her voice quiet but final. You cannot invoice for affection. You cannot defraud the court, and you cannot extort your own resident. She took the pre-drafted consent order. She initialed the bottom of each page. She signed the last page with a flourish. Then she slid the document and a single black pen across the mahogany to the vice president. You will sign this or I will refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal fraud. Your choice. The vice president picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He signed. He pushed it to Karen. She stared at the pen. She looked at me, her eyes finally, hopelessly empty. No rage, no sadness, just nothing. She signed. They both paused, their pens hovering for a second over the clause admitting their choice. Era just stared, unblinking. They signed. The document was pushed to Era, who signed, then to me. I signed my name. It was done. Judge Sharma stood. This mediation is concluded. The order is filed. She looked at Karen and the vice president. I suggest you find a new hobby. She left the room. Era gathered our binders. Strauss was muttering to Karen and the vice president. Brad had his head in his hands. I stood up. I had one last thing to do. For the record, I said, looking at the red recording light. My neighborhood froze. I pulled my 264-word statement from my folder. I did not look at them. I looked at the microphone. I am here today not to litigate a relationship. I am here to close a ledger. For decades I was told my value was conditional. I was taught that neighborly love was transactional and that my role was to be a silent, uncomplaining source of funds. The $312,000 invoice was not an anomaly. It was the logical conclusion of that education. It was the moment the subtext became text. It was the moment the debt I never agreed to was called due. I paused. My response was not an attack. It was an audit. This, I said, tapping the consent order, is the result of that audit. It is the establishment of a firewall where a foundation should have been. It is a legal clarification of what was always an emotional fact. We are not a neighborhood. We are a failed business arrangement. I picked up my files. This action was not about revenge. It was about an audit. The audit is complete. The books are balanced. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the handle. I looked over my shoulder at all three of them for the last time. From now on, my anniversaries will be attended by the people who actually choose to be there. I opened the door, walked out, and did not look back. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing them in with the high, ringing, deafening silence. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so curious to know where you're tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're listening from and share your thoughts on this. It means the world to me. And if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving this video a like, and hitting that hype button to help more people find it. Your support is everything.